Good evening. Welcome to the January 10th Finance Committee meeting. We have a relatively short agenda and a relatively short staff this evening. We are expecting at least one more member, so if we have anything to vote on, we will have a quorum or we won't vote. The agenda tonight will be to have an update on the FY17 spending, which is this fiscal year that we're in right now, and then just an open discussion on the budget presentations, which we had on Saturday. And because of the snowstorm, we cut it a little bit short and finished most of it up last night at the Selectmen's meeting. So we're through most all of the departmental reviews. The Water Department will be coming in on February 7th to our scheduled meeting on February 7th as Scott will be presenting his budget, the Water Department budget, to his commissioners on the 25th, I believe it is, of January. So he wouldn't have been ready for Saturday in any event. So that's where we are on that. So if Bonnie can just sort of give us a brief update on FY17, and then we can chat a little bit about the goings-on Saturday and last night. Thank you.
The fiscal 17 operating budget, I just reviewed the financials today. The auditor happens to be in starting his field work for fiscal 16, so it was a good timing. We are strong for fiscal 17. We're meeting our projections as targeted. So I'm confident that if, there are some 9C cuts coming down from the state in the spring, we should be able to manage those without any draconian measures going forward. We will need to address them in 18 if they do materialize for full year impact. But I think for 17 we're strong. The hotel room tax is coming in where we expected, a little bit above where we expected. The meals tax is still growing with the addition of the new restaurants that are coming on for the point. So that's been a help. Building permits, we did push those projections for this fiscal year. They're still exceeding that. It's kind of an anomaly. We're treating it as that. We're not budgeting it as a sustainable revenue because the typical norm in previous years was about $200,000 to $300,000, and we're in the $400,000 to $700,000 range right now just because of what's in the pipeline. But again, that's not necessarily a sustainable revenue stream because once we reach build out, we reach build out. So we are in pretty good standing for fiscal 2017. I would say for fiscal 2018, with the level staffing projections that we have in place right now, we were running about a $600,000 deficit. So with the additional staffing that's been requested to date, that went through this past weekend, the deficit, if we fully funded all of that, would be about $1.4 million to $1.5 million. I do need to go back through the revenue projections because our excise is still, growing. We have had some increases in personal property growth that I need to kind of see if we're on target with our new growth estimates. But, I'm fairly confident it's somewhere in the $1.4 million to $1.5 million.
Does that include the incremental spending that the schools are asking for?
It does. It does.
The town side of the incremental spending was about $800,000.
Right.
And
if the town bore the full impact of the $1.15 million that they were requesting, the deficit would be $1.4 million to $1.5 million in that range. So if that budget can be absorbed in the use of reserves or other available resources, then that would mitigate that.
That will lessen the pain.
Yes. So that would be the biggest impact, the $1.4 million to $1.5 million. Okay. So I would think it, again, I'm always conservative. It will be somewhere south of that in the end. So there are a few things that I need to still work out in the 2018 budget documents. I mentioned last night with the IT budget, we're still working through the phone, the telecommunications, and the internet and email exchange service. So we'll come up with the monthly incremental increases for that in the next week or so. I do want to meet with a conservation agent and just make sure that her hours are accurate. You might not remember, but previous to Amy's arrival, we were budgeting like 35 hours a week for a conservation assistant. Amy's been managing through last year at 21 hours a week because she's very good at what she does. But this year, she's had a lot of activity, and I actually had to notify her that she's tracking a little bit ahead of budget. So we might need to adjust that. However, again, due to Amy's work, she's been able to increase the fees from the Wetland Protection Act account, which is used as an offset to the budget. So I think we can mitigate the impact, but I want to make sure that she has the adequate hours in order to effectively do her job. So I want to meet with her about that. Other than that, I don't think that there are any more surprises in the 2018 budget.
On the capital side, last night during your budget presentation, you mentioned basically the new enterprise system that you want to bring on, which would be in the $300,000 range as a capital expense and would take 18 months to 2 years to implement, probably.
Approximately, yep.
In that range, right? So if the Board of Selectmen wanted to support it and we found $300,000 in capital to do it, that would be early on in the year you would see that expenditure, or is that sort of spread out over the year?
We're going to be meeting with Munis again in the next 2 weeks, because what I wanted to do is have them give me almost a cash flow analysis of it. If there's a way to mitigate the impact, we'd have to commit to it, and say that we're going to fund this over 2 years instead of 1. But if we bring on, say, the accounting modules and certain adjacent modules with accounting first, and then do the payroll and human resources modules in the second year, that might mitigate the impact over the life. It will be more costly, but not in a given particular year, because we'd have to run the support for the 2 modules over 2 years.
So if you were to prioritize the modules that you would want to bring on in which order?
Correct.
Which would they be?
Accounting is first. That's the easiest, and it's the backbone of the infrastructure, per se. And then payroll and HR would be last. So it would be accounting, collections, and then payroll and human resources.
Accounting includes accounts payable then?
Yes.
From your standpoint?
Okay, and this would be used by all departments but
All 4
light and
departments.
water? Or would light and water?
Light and water would import into our system.
Okay.
We process all of the town's bills, so that includes all of the enterprise funds. So the schools, they might have their own chart, it imports into mine, we actually cut the checks and approve the bills. Light and water is the same thing. They have their own system over there, I can't remember the name of it, but they just recently converted. Their system imports into ours, and we still have the final review. We have to approve
So they can't
the
actually
bills.
distribute the funds?
No, only
Interesting.
the treasurers.
Okay, so there would be transparency across all town
Yes.
accounts?
Yes.
Okay.
And the nice thing is, it does have a wonderful interface with the public, in that if you want to look at, where the expenses are being posted and paid, you can drill down into that through a web application. And it's public information. It's available to anybody that wants it. So it's a nice feature. And it's something that is in demand. I mean, we get requests all the time that we have to manually create. So we're kind of looking forward to it.
Okay.
And there's lots of other towns around that are using the same software?
Munis is
and
the
so on?
most popular in
Okay.
the state of Massachusetts. This is what they do.
Okay.
It's their bread and butter.
Okay.
And again, our system is 10 years old.
No,
We've been using it it's served us well. It's just not meeting the needs that we have now for data.
10 years is a long time for software.
Yeah, and they're not, at some point, they're not going to support it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else at this point? Bonnie, you're scheduled to make a presentation to the selectmen
Correct.
on the 24th?
3rd, I think the 23rd is Monday.
23rd, I guess it is. I'm sorry,
Yep.
I'm off a day on the, because the 24th would be a Tuesday for us.
Yes, and that's when they'll give me kind of my marching orders with priorities. So I'll submit a draft capital plan and a draft budget or I'll show them the two budgets, the level staffing and the mission, and give them the highlights of what's involved in the mission request so they can kind of prioritize those.
So at this point, you're saying just with level staffing, oh, no, the level staffing, we're okay, but if you go to mission, then we're the 1.5 million, or even the level staffing is $1.5 million?
Level staffing is running a small deficit at this point, but I still need to go through and figure out, we have new growth projections in there, but, the further along we get in the year, the better the projections are. The new growth projections aren't really finalized until June 30th, so it's.
Right,
But we were, I think the last numbers we saw, we were like 200,000.
Correct.
A deficit of 200,000.
Which is, it's a deficit, but, on a
At this point in
$45
time,
million
that's like good, right.
budget.
That was
it's-
without the school increase, right?
Correct. That was with a
700.
projected school increase of 725.
Yeah, okay.
But again, this is level staffing you're talking about. Even with the certified revenue growth that we talked about at last town meeting,
Correct.
the whole revenue growth in the
Well,
budget.
that's a whole other policy discussion, because with that certified revenue growth,
Right.
that new growth, my recommendation was to take that incremental increase over what we had planned on and
Right.
put it towards capital.
Yeah, I agree,
So
yeah.
if I do that, I'm still with that $200,000
Okay, that's what I wanted to make
Yes.
sure of, what numbers you were using there. So you weren't using the full number there because.
No, I'm
okay.
using my recommended numbers.
Okay.
And so the boards will need to make their policy decisions on, is that the right
Yes.
process
So
to
we just
follow.
need to be, yeah.
And with that money being allocated to capital, the target capital number that you have in your mind right now is
Two and a
what?
half, 2.5 million,
Oh,
which is what we've spent the
Right.
last few years.
Right.
So it's just maintaining our spending. It's not increasing it, it's just
Right.
maintaining our spending on the infrastructure.
I know PMBC's request this year was about $100,000 less, and I think we do have some unspent funds that I guess you and Darrell will probably
Correct.
flesh out before the meeting with the selectmen or not?
We will, yeah.
Okay.
We typically try and do that.
So, when, it would be good when the selectmen hear about PMBC's request of, say, 300,000, that we have X number of dollars to reallocate toward that.
To mitigate that, yep. Yes, and if, out of the 2.5 million, if it's decided by the boards that we don't want to spend the 2.5 million, we only want to spend 2 million, the $500,000 could be deposited to the debt exclusion stabilization, the regular stabilization, it could be, saved
right.
for future years.
Yep.
So, but it wouldn't, in my recommendation, it wouldn't go to the operating budget.
No, because we haven't done that, so.
Right.
But we do have a number of requests in the mission budget for increasing staff.
Right.
The big one being fire, going to paramedic service.
Now, the fire one is included with an offset from the ambulance receipts, so it could be mitigated. And my $1.5 million deficit includes that mitigation factor. Because they're saying we're going to spend this much more for staffing and benefits, but we're going to increase the transfer from the ambulance receipts. So if we didn't increase the transfer, it would be, a $2 million.
But there's a lag on the increase in ambulance receipts, so what we would be doing, assuming we decided to make this investment, is spending down what we've been able
Yes.
to
Accumulate.
build up and accumulate in ambulance receipts. We'd be spending that down and then betting on the fact that what the chief is saying is we'll be able to raise our collection rate back to where it was several years ago before we went to this present company.
Correct.
So that's a bit of a leap of faith.
That's
that
the
we
best
can
case
do that.
scenario. The worst case scenario is that it doesn't quite meet
Right.
the expense stream. And what I've tried to make clear with the boards is it's a service level. You want to make your decision on a service level capacity. Our hope is that it offsets itself, but it may not. It might be a little short.
Right, but I think as we get into it, our role is fiduciary, right? It's the financial side of the equation. And is it worth the risk financially to do this? We haven't really discussed it as a board, but I would think he makes a pretty strong case for going forward as long as we can mitigate the risk as much as possible. So that'd be what I would want to see some more detail on before we actually went forward with a recommendation. But there's no question that having paramedics right around the corner versus waiting for somebody to come from Lincoln is no question a better level of service. But
So what I'm not really clear on is the timing for bringing new staff on and bringing on the new collection agency. Are they coincidental, or
No.
does one happen before the other?
One happens before the other. The staffing comes on first
Okay.
to get the training and the certifications that they need. And in that period, we continue to operate as we have been. So that's where we draw down from the ambulance receipts. And it's not really until a year later that we go live.
Right.
And that we're able to make the transition to the new billing company and fully a paramedic enterprise. And that way we generate. So there's really a full year of transition. But they have built up their reserves, in the ambulance receipts account. And we think that that can be mitigated over the next 5 years while we ramp that up.
again, I think we need a really detailed look at that before we make a recommendation, but it's pretty hard to argue that the benefit side isn't there. And if we have to pony up some money to do it, at least everybody needs to understand that we're ponying up money to do it.
And the numbers are going up and our population's going up, and once this happens, it's not like some ambulances go out with just an EMT. They're all paramedic at that point, so the billing rate is all at a paramedic level.
And Alan and I
So-
are getting older,
Yeah.
so we're gonna.
Yeah, no, Steve and I aren't, but I'm glad you guys are.
I heard you thinking of that. Okay.
I didn't think to ask the chief when we were talking about this switching over to paramedic service. But he was mentioning our contiguous towns that now have full paramedic service. And I was wondering just now, did they go about it the way we're going about it? They hired paramedics all in one swell foop? Or did they go about it incrementally, that when they needed a new EMT, they hired a paramedic instead of an EMT?
I can't speak definitively on that, but I believe that once you make that decision to go paramedic, you need to staff for it. So I think they might have had some paramedics on staff just adjacently, but I think when they made the decision to provide ALS, they're required to show that they have the staffing level.
No, I realize that, but I'm just wondering if they said, okay, we're going to go ALS service 5 years from now. In the meantime, if we have to hire another EMT, we hire a paramedic instead.
Yep.
So that when we reach year 5, we can leap forward with hiring 2 guys instead of 6 guys and.
Probably wouldn't have a paramedic
Yeah.
that would want to just operate as an EMT, though. He would, they
Right,
couldn't
they wouldn't be
operate
operating as a paramedic. They couldn't
You
provide.
could, but,
They couldn't,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. I think that.
They
I'm-
wouldn't have the supplies on the ambulances.
Right.
you know.
I am almost positive that Westford did the same process that we did, that they made the decision to go paramedic. I know Acton is. I don't know what Air did because it was, 10, 15 years ago when they've been paramedic for a long
wow.
time, a long time.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. So I don't know what they did, but I do know that Acton and Westford are following essentially the same process that we are. And looking at it as a holistic.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other of the, quote, mission staffing increases that sort of jumped out at anybody that you want to talk to it tonight?
Yeah.
Alan? Yep.
Human Services, I made a pitch the other day at our Saturday meeting about fully funding Elder and Human Services in terms of their transportation, and the hiring of the new outreach worker. And my point was that if this is the way we want to go, that it seems to me that we should be funding it and not relying on donations coming in order to keep the vans on the road, in drivers and maintenance, whatever. So I want us to give serious consideration to that part of the mission budget, especially. That's going to be the one I'm interested in seeing something happen with this year.
So you're specifically talking, though, right now, the transportation, which has gotten to be a huge part of what they do, but most of that's done by other funding. The town is not funding that, right?
That's right.
And so I just want to make sure that people understand that. So what you're saying, rather than having the friends and the donations and this and that, because people are really relying on that transportation now, that really needs to be funded by the town so that we know that's there going forward, if in fact the town's committed to doing that.
That's exactly right.
Because otherwise it could go away tomorrow now that people are very dependent on it.
Yeah. That's my
So,
point.
and that's not part of this mission
Right,
budget.
right. That's what I'm,
Yeah.
that was
So
my
it was
question.
verbally presented, so I don't know how we capture it here.
You know,
Well, it's in their mission budget though,
Their
right?
mission budget requested a full-time outreach coordinator, another outreach
Right.
coordinator.
And a driver.
And a 19-and-a-half-hour-a-week driver.
That's not funding for everything that Alan's talking, that's not what Alan's talking about though.
But there's no reason why we can't.
but,
I mean, in the,
okay, but then we need to either ask Pam or Bonnie or somebody to.
to give us the numbers.
What would that not be?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was getting to, was to ask you to come up with an estimate, fairly good estimate of what that would cost us.
Yeah, the MART program, I would not want to see us not spend that
No.
68,000 from MART, because.
We have the MART
that's
stuff. I'm
great.
talking about all the additional van we have now and the one that Pam is saving money to buy. So,
Okay. That's easy to do. I mean, we can.
okay.
The other
It
suggestion.
doesn't all have to be additive either. It may be that you take a look at that budget, and I don't know the details what's in there, and maybe we say, look, this is the stuff that we really want the town to fund, and maybe some of those other funds that they have, maybe there's other things that could be covered by those instead.
Well, that's what I had mentioned Saturday about Tina's salary particularly, because she's split up into 3 different groups. She's got, 30 hours supported by the town, 8 hours supported by the formula grant, and 2 hours by the Friends. And then you're looking to hire another 40-hour-a-week position and be fully funded by the town. Why not have both of them be fully funded by the town? Relieve the formula grant to use towards transportation. That's a recurring revenue. We get that every year. It's a grant that we get based on our population, so it's not going anywhere. And use that for the MART program. Get rid of the fact that we're splitting her salary all over the place, and support both of them in the general fund. And maybe a portion for transportation, I don't.
Alan, is this something that you could work with Bonnie on? I mean, it obviously is something
Yeah.
that you're really
I feel-
interested in
yeah,
here. And
I'll
if you
work
could
with
work
Pam
with
and
her
Bonnie.
and Pam and see if, we can put something together that makes sense, so come back and present it, and we can discuss it.
Yep,
And
and the
see.
town we've made changes in the last few years. We used to pay the gasoline out of the MART account, and a few years ago, we said we're gonna pay that out of the town's budget, which was about $10,000 a year, just to give some relief to MART to be able to hire the drivers that they needed, because the service was being,
Right.
increased. So we can look at those components too, if there's anything else in there.
And I think the conversation needs to be, it just seems like the town needs to just say, this is what we're doing, and people understand it. This is like, you have to view it, from my standpoint, it's like the schools, only for that different end of the population. It's not a need-based thing anymore, right? It's not anything like that. It's just, these are services we're providing for this part of the population. And that's what it is.
Yeah.
We also spoke to Pam about looking at the exemption limits. We have exemptions for, veterans, blind, surviving spouse. Currently, we have an allowance of 50% over the state limit. So if it's a $500, exemption, we give them $750 because it's another 50% over it. We're looking at expanding that to maybe 100% because we do have enough budgeted under the overlay account to do that. And that hits the target people that really need it. And it's not necessarily a budget impact because we do have it in there right now. And looking at the senior work program too, to see if we can fund that at the level that it really needs to be funded at to mitigate the increases in minimum wage that we've had over the last 3 years.
And what would be the impact of that? The dollar
Right now,
impact?
for the minimum wage impact, it's about 25,000. We have 55,000 reserved for the program now.
Right.
We haven't increased it at all over the last few years, but the minimum wage impact has gone up. We need to bring it to 80 just to mitigate the minimum wage impact, which we can do. Again, we have overlay surplus releases every few years. You know, once we realize our ATB cases or our appellate tax board cases are settled, we release the money back to the general fund. It would kind of be an offset to that.
But 55 to 80 is a 50% increase, right? In minimum wage hasn't gone up 50%, or has it? Has it? Maybe it has.
It's-
huh?
Yeah, I mean, it
Gone from
started
8
out
to
at
13?
$7.75 and it's at 11.
It's 11
Okay,
now.
all right, so it has
You
almost.
know, I mean, we
Okay.
really haven't changed
Okay.
it since the
Okay.
7.75, so.
And does
I
this,
think percentage-wise, it seems, wow.
and does some of this address the incremental, you were looking for incremental hours?
Yes, it does, because what happens is we have a pool of 55,000. So if you have 120 people apply, we don't turn anybody away. So it's just the percentage that you get. So if it's, you know, if you're paying $11 an hour versus $7 an hour, you're going to get a smaller number of hours and
Okay,
a
so
smaller,
minimum wage has gone up, but the pool of money hasn't
Correct.
gone up,
It
so
has
the
not.
hours have gone down.
correct. Which
So-
creates problems in both areas. They're working less hours, they're not getting the benefit that they normally would. We have to train new people. Like, I have specific duties that need to be met, so now instead of 4 people that can do it for the year, I have to train 6. And they might not be as, you know, because they're earning their hours quicker.
Oh, and they have to, and they max out.
Right.
Well, is that because the rule is they can't go over that, and now the minimum wage has gone up, so that's what it is, right?
It's because, yes,
Okay.
it is what it is, minimum wage has gone
So
up.
it's not just that the pool of money's not there, it's just that they can only earn so much.
Right.
Okay, so that's why you need more people to do the same thing.
To fully fund the program at the level that the state allows, we'd have to budget like 120, 130,000. So we're still below the state, but we, you know, to hold them harmless, we need to bring it to 80.
So from a service standpoint, service to town hall or wherever these seniors are working, does the $80,000, the incremental 25,000, bringing it up to 80,000, does that get you and your fellow managers back to whole?
It gets
or-
us back to where we were. You know, I don't think we were ever whole. It's, you know, do I need to train 4 employees? Would I like to just train 2 senior workers and have them be experts at it? Sure.
This doesn't fix that anyway.
Well, if
Right.
you funded it at 120, it would.
Okay, I thought the issue was, so you're saying you'd raise the max that a person can earn. I thought you were saying they were maxing out anyway, that you can only say they can only earn this much regardless, but the minimum wage going up impacts that, but you're not, that's not the issue.
Well, it is partly. Bringing it to 80 would
Yep.
bring me back to where I was 4 years ago, where I had 4 good people. That's all I had to train. And other departments. I'm just using myself as an example.
Is there any limit to how much somebody can earn in this program?
Yes, it's like $1,000 a year.
And do most people earn that?
No.
Okay,
No.
this is
We
the
don't
piece that I was
put enough in
missing.
there.
No.
Okay, because there's not enough in there.
Right.
Okay, sorry,
So
that
if we
was
have
the piece I was
120
missing.
people that
Right.
enroll, which is typical, we need $120,000.
Yeah, you
To fund
generally, the people that have been working 3 or 4 years are this year the benefit is less than it was last year and less than it was the
And the
year
taxes
before
go
that.
up.
Yeah.
Because minimum wage has gone up, but we haven't increased the pool of money.
I understand that. I thought there was some limit on that they couldn't earn over $600,
It's a-
whatever it
it's
was. and
$1,000
if
a
that's
year.
the case, then you're still gonna have to hire more people anyway. That's what I was missing.
Their
I get it.
earnings have stayed about the same.
Their
Yes.
number of dollars have stayed about the same.
They work more hours for less money,
Correct.
or they work less hours
Right.
for more money.
The pool hasn't changed, so we just divide it by the 120 and we figure out how many hours. So they're working less hours for the same benefit. The town is feeling the impact in that now my people are running out and they want to work.
I was
You know,
gonna say, that's the
they
part
wanna
Pam
work.
always says, and
wanna
they
work.
really give them, you
They
know,
do, you know, I mean, I can't tell you enough. They
You need some
come in and they're
structure
like,
your
I'm
life
done,
and
I'm
something to do,
sorry.
absolutely, right.
Most of the ones that I know are unhappy that they run out of hours less than halfway through the year, because they enjoy the interaction
Right.
of
It's a
coming
social-
in
Right.
a couple of days a week and
Sure.
spending some
being
time.
useful.
Right?
Yeah,
And it is, it's,
the
I mean,
money's
I'd
good,
have to
you
pay-
know,
I'd
it
have to pay
comes off
somebody.
your income,
Yeah, right.
your property tax, but it's the interaction and feeling like you're still contributing.
Absolutely.
Right, relevant. You're being
It's
relevant.
huge.
Yep. Yeah, if they
That's the
weren't there, I would
win-win-win,
have to
that's for
pay
sure.
somebody to do, I mean, the checks still have to go out.
So the way the accounting works is if I worked and I earned $500 worth of work, $500 would come off of my property tax.
Correct.
I would get a 1099 for $500, and I have to pay taxes on that?
No, we have to withhold under federal, it's weird, it's a weird federal law, we have to withhold a certain amount of federal taxes. And then they can apply to get a certain amount back at the end of the year. But it is a credit directly to the tax bill minus that federal adjustment.
Okay, so if I earn 500, for example.
You might have
and you held
485, but-
25 for federal tax, I would get 475 off my
Off your property tax bill.
property tax.
Correct.
Okay.
And then
But there's no cash
No.
transferring?
No,
Okay. Okay.
it's a great program. And
So do we have time for public input?
I mean,
We can ask
I did have one, you know, being facetious aside, I did have a question about a very small item from Saturday, and that was I think it was a $25,000 request for these fire call boxes.
Yes.
And you said that there's a fire alarm fund. Can you further expound on that?
Sure, if there are fees generated from false alarms, those fees go into a revolving account, and they're supposed to be used to maintain the system. So there haven't been any expenses paid out of it. And the accumulated balance right now is 28,000 and change. I mentioned it Saturday. So that money could be used to maintain the system. So if any of those boxes need to be swapped out, that's an appropriate use of this fund.
Now, as a revolving fund, that doesn't have to be appropriated,
No,
right?
you can just do it.
So who has the authority to spend that money?
The fire department,
So fire chief or with your approval?
Right.
Okay.
right,
So we could take that off the
So we would-
PMBC
absolutely.
list.
And if they were one of those call boxes that were in a public building someplace, not in a public building, in a private building, in a business or something like, or do they even have those? Are they just in public buildings? Just trying to think. I guess they would
I
just be
think
in
they're
public
all at the
buildings.
station, really.
Huh?
They're,
The 7 that we're requesting are all in
Right. They're all,
town buildings.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just curious as if there were some other buildings that needed it, would somebody else pay for that? But I guess they would all be in public buildings, so
I
effectively they'd all
don't-
be the fire department
yeah, I
anyway, right?
don't know of
right.
any that are
Okay,
not
never
in
mind.
public buildings.
But the
Yep.
false alarms come from private call boxes.
That
Is
was
that
kind of the
right?
connection.
But the private are going into the public system. So it's one system.
Okay.
So it's an appropriate use of it, and that's really why it's there. You want to maintain the system through the false alarms. And they don't charge a false alarm like your first alarm. It's usually like the third alarm. That's when they start saying, hey, so,
And that's not our system in terms of our call boxes going off. This is, they have their own system that is
Right.
tied into the fire department and.
yes. This is very common in other communities. They have this fund created to maintain the system.
Yeah,
That benefits everybody, so.
makes sense.
Terrific. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have enough to accomplish what we need to accomplish in there, we should expect at least that $25,000 capital expenditure to come off the list.
Right.
Okay, good.
one other thing, Fred. I questioned on Saturday, and I asked Bonnie about it privately, but it had to do with unions and the 2% raises and who's in the union and who isn't. And the question was about, do the lunch ladies, people who work in the lunchrooms, there's things like that, do they get the 2%? And
No.
they don't belong to anything. I don't understand exactly how that works.
They're school department employees, so they're under the school committee's jurisdiction. The school did mention at the meeting that they wanted to give the lunch employees, the cafeteria employees, an increase because they hadn't been.
Well, that's how this whole thing came up.
Right.
They
Yeah.
should, I don't understand why they're not treated like every other town employee.
Now,
That doesn't make
what about
sense.
custodians? Are they in the,
School department employees.
they're in
They're
the same boat,
completely
right?
separate, yes.
They're not on the town grid
No.
of jobs.
And they're not on the union.
They're not on the union. They're falling between the cracks the way some of the townhouse employees used to.
Yeah.
Before we got everybody on
Yeah.
lanes and.
They do
grids.
periodically, do wage adjustments. Like, they did admin wage adjustments, I think, in the last year, and so the school committee does look at their units, I would call them units, but, not necessarily just the LEA, the teachers' union. They look at the custodial staff, the administration, which is non-union, cafeteria workers, they just,
And was there some discussion at some point that a lot of them, they're part-time, but they're enough hours that they get benefits? And so, I mean, there's probably some balancing that goes on there as well, right?
yeah. Some of the employees are, they might not be union, but they're benefit eligible, and they're getting, the benefits for the,
You know, they're working the
Partial
minimum
year, yeah.
hours in order to do that. So
Correct.
that's part of the package, I think. Which is,
Yep.
one of, as we learned from the numbers last night especially, right? It's a
big
significant.
impact,
Yeah.
big impact.
So, yep.
Okay.
All right, so what else is on here? Park and Rec, I mean, Highway Department is still down, although it sounds like he's having a hard time finding people, even if he hasn't budgeted, but, and of course, we don't have the field study, right? The maintenance, so it's hard to go after that without,
To be perfectly blunt about it, that ticks me off.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we went to bat for them, and they just have not, they haven't even got the bid out
Right.
for the study.
meaning Park and Rec now,
Yeah,
not the Highway
Park and Rec.
Department, Park and
No,
Rec, haven't gone
absolutely,
out and done
yeah.
that study yet for the field.
What's holding that up? Do you know?
They just need a spec and to send it out.
The commissioners haven't done it. Whatever, but it hasn't come forward to go out to bid,
Right.
so.
Have the selectmen putting heat on that? Because they should be driving that also. They were driving the alumni field pretty strong. They should be driving that as well, right?
I don't know
but they
that
should.
What about the space needs study? Where are we on that?
I have not seen a bid go out yet. I have seen discussions go back and forth, but I haven't seen a bid spec go out at this point.
That's another thing that they talked about.
We have, Rich Crowley was looking at it. He's got one price, and he just hasn't been able to get any other prices. They're trying to keep it under $10,000,
Okay.
so.
But didn't we authorize up to 20?
Yeah.
Trying to keep it under 10,000 is a good idea, but not to the extent
job
that it goes on for months and months and months without getting the study done.
Right.
Because this board and the selectmen all bought into doing that. And that's one of the things about, if this is the year of the seniors, that's one of the things they told the seniors they were going to do.
That's correct.
So
We just need to put a request out for qualifications on that, so that you could interview designers.
if we could put some heat on that,
I'll send Joe an email tonight.
thanks.
Can I just, not necessarily budget related, but related to the fields and alumni and, well, the fields and alumni, again, is the other contingent supposedly on going forward with all that stuff was the ownership and the management. Anything being done on that at all? Do you know who's driving that from a selectman standpoint?
I do not know who's, the discussion around the MOU needs to happen.
Yeah, it's way more than an MOU. I hate people saying that, but yeah.
No, I agree with you. We need to revisit the whole agreement that we have, and going forward, what's going to happen with a renovated facility. There has not been any.
I thought in one of the meetings that we had with them that Chuck and Paul were going to be the Paul Glady were going to be the select representatives on that group. So I guess we could, next
Follow
time,
up with them, yeah.
put a feeler out to them and see what they're doing, if anything.
I'll follow up tomorrow with these requests.
Who from us? It was gonna be, Greg, I think maybe we want to be involved with that, wasn't it Greg?
From our group, it was
I think
Greg.
so. It was
Yeah.
Greg, right?
But,
But they were driving it, absolutely.
yeah, they were the two that were supposed to be driving it, I thought. I don't know. Okay.
Is
Anything
there-
else? The, one thing that I had, looking at the schedule, we were scheduled to meet next Tuesday, the 17th, with the Selectmen and School Committee. But Bonnie will be ready to present at least her first round consolidation to the Selectmen on the 23rd,
Yes.
I guess.
Yep.
So maybe it makes better sense for us not to meet next week, meet on the 24th. Hopefully, we'll have the capital, and hopefully some of the selectmen's priorities coming out of that meeting. If not, we'll have the list anyway that we can go over. The following week, which is already scheduled, or we have scheduled on February 7th, we'll move the joint meeting to that meeting, because the selectmen will have already had their meeting. We will have had a meeting on the 25th to look at it. Then we can have the joint meeting on the 7th. And along with selectmen, school committee, and us, Scott will come in on the 7th to present the water budget. Which he will have presented either the 24th or 25th to his board. So Scott was going to come in anyway on the 7th once, I talked to him after Saturday.
So, Fred, just to
Yep.
make, because you put a lot of other dates out there, the only ones I have down are the 17th, which we're saying we probably won't meet, and then the next one is the 7th. Is that correct?
Right. The schedule as it is right now, the 10th tonight.
Yep.
The 17th next
Yep.
week, the 7th.
Right, okay,
So what I'm proposing is we don't do the 17th
right.
and we do the 24th.
Oh,
Which is-
okay, so I'm adding the 24th.
So I'm just swapping the 17th for the 24th.
Okay.
If that works for people, and
Fine for me.
as we have a quorum, we can actually vote it, and if the other guys can make it, wonderful, and if they can't, they can't.
Well, I propose we do exactly that.
Second.
Okay, I have a proposal and a second to eliminate January 17th meeting, add a January 24th meeting, and shift the February 7th meeting to be a joint meeting with the Selectmen School Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have it. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And seeing no public out there, I assume we have no public input tonight. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, there's nobody left to vote. All in favor? All in favor, please?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.